Disclose TV and I welcome back Jarrah White. Tonight's discussion will be focused on, but not limited to, SpaceX flight to Mars and human survival in deep space. The long-term missions, so to say. Before we get to the questions, I'm going to let Jarrah White introduce himself for those that may not be familiar with him. And take it away, Jarrah.
Okay, well, when I was a child, I was always fascinated with space exploration. And of course, I dreamed of becoming an astronaut. I dreamed of becoming the first man to walk on Mars. Of course, years later, during my teenage years, I learned of the moon landing hoax conspiracy theory. And so I went back to everything I had learned previously about astronomy and space, and of course checked out the moon landing hoax books and documentaries and all this stuff along those lines. And of course I found various propaganda websites really trying to try and discredit the conspiracy theories. And it quickly became apparent that these propagandist sites were all just like I said, they were just propaganda. They were trying to muddy the waters. They were trying to downplay the radiation hazard, and that's kind of how the Moonfaker series came about. Originally, I wanted to write up this huge essay for download off the Bill Casing Tribute website, disproving these propaganda claims. But eventually, it became a ongoing series, and people often ask me, like, what is my main motivation with making those videos? And of course my opponents obviously try to cast aspersions on my intentions. Oh, he's doing it for money, he's doing it for attention, he's doing it for this, he's doing it for that. No, the main reason why I wanted to make the Moonfaker series was because I wanted to get people aware of the radiation hazard, so that once we have the Apollo moonlanding hoax conspiracy out in the open, people can actually start trying to put their heads together to work out how do we solve the radiation hazard so we can actually send people to the moon and Mars for real, And about a few years ago, obviously SpaceX they started making a name for themselves and launching their Dragon spacecraft, their Falcon rockets. At first, I didn't think much of them, but I later learned that they had plans to build a gigantic Falcon rocket called the Falcon 20, which could potentially lift, at the time they were proposing to lift 150 tons to Earth orbit. And of course you can do the calculations. A rocket's payload to the moon is a third of its payload to Earth orbit, because obviously the remaining two-thirds have to account for the propellants, and likewise a trip to Mars, a rocket's payload to Mars is a quarter of its payload to Earth orbit. So this rocket that they were proposing could, with two additional first stages as side boosters, like the Falcon Heavy, it could potentially lift the radiation shield that would be required to shelter the astronauts against the radiation. You need 2 meters of water completely surrounding the capsule, and so basically this rocket could potentially launch the capsule, could launch the Dragon. And it is a upper stage if you're doing a moon mission, an upper stage could lift could carry all the propellant for the mission, all the propellant for the trans-Earth injection burn. If you're doing a Mars flight, you would need a second rocket to basically dock with the Mander stack and send it off to Mars. Of course, for Mars, you probably would need a larger habitat module, like a BA 330 inflatable habitat. But there's been a lot of misconceptions, really, from not just from NASA, but even the private sector regarding what is required to shield you against the radiation. It's the dangerously accepted position seems to be whatever works for the ISS will work for a manned mission to the moon or Mars. Well, that's not going to be the case, because in Earth orbit you have the Earth's magnetic field mostly blocking out most of the radiation from the sun, and of course it's below the Van Allen radiation belt. On a trip to Mars, you're not going to have that luxury, and it is my fear that if these private sectors do not rectify the problems with their shielding proposals, then obviously they stand in jeopardy of losing their crews to space radiation.
All right, excellent. we can go right into the first question that I have here. And some of the questions you may have touched on, but I'm going to read what I have, and you can comment further and or repeat what was said. And the first question is from Zorg. NASA has stated it would only require 1 meter of water to shield from radiation. I would like to know if that is how Musk's team will be achieving this flight to Mars. Also, he wonders about how they will land this huge spaceship on Mars, considering they are taking the whole second stage in for a landing. Will it just sink into the loose soil on Mars? What are the chances of the rocket falling over? I mean, it's pretty tall even without the first stage. Are they taking enough supplies to build, or will they do that on site?
Well, first of all, it's a bit of a misconception, really, with what NASA is proposing. I'm not sure where he got the 1 meter number that was said by NASA. NASA, they're proposing only about 20 centimeters of water because, well, that's the equivalent that the ISS has, so we'll use it on Mars. Well, that's not going to work. Now, in the case of there's been proposals by various other people like Eugene Parker and John H. Morton. These are astrophysicists. They correctly propose several meters of water to shield you against the radiation on a flight to Mars and deep space exploration and stuff. Now, in the case of SpaceX, what made me really interested in SpaceX, and that made me feel that SpaceX has the keys to solve the problem, is that Musk had stated in an interview on the BBC back in 2012. He said that we have to have a column of water always between us and the radiation. At first, I thought he was proposing a smaller capsule with several meters of water surrounding it to protect them against the radiation. But it turns out that he was proposing, oh, no, we'll just keep one side of the capsule sheltered with the water and we keep that pointed to the sun. That's not going to work because it's a really common misconception that the idea that solar flares are directional. They aren't. See, the sun has its own magnetic field that fans out across the entire solar system, and it sends these particles flying off in all directions. In fact, there was a massive solar flare on January 27, 2012, if I recall correctly, that actually erupted away from the sun. Erupted away from the Earth, but it ended up reaching both the Earth and Mars because of these magnetic field lines. It was detected by Stereo B and the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, clearly indicating that these flares are not directional, which means you need to have all sides of the capsule sheltered. As for how they propose on landing this thing, Musk has opted for propulsive landings on Mars. I often wonder if he had read Ralph Renee's book, NASA Moon to America. He had an appendix about that in which he questioned whether the unmanned Viking landers and the Pathfinder landers had actually landed on Mars, because the chutes he questioned that the chutes would work, you see, because Mars has a very thin atmosphere, and you go up so high into Earth's atmosphere, you get to a point where the chutes aren't going to work because there's not enough air pressure filling these chutes up. And so I often wonder if Musk had read this appendix in his book and proposed, okay, well, I'll just go for propulsive landings. Because literally that is what he's proposing. He's proposing, on a smaller scale, he's proposing propulsive landings with the Dragon spacecraft. See, the Dragon can use its abort engines. It has these Super Draco engines built around the side of it. In the event of a malfunction, it can blast itself away from the rocket, I'm sorry. And those same engines could be used to make propulsive landings onto the Moon and Mars. And so his proposed Mars Colonial Transport System, or Interplanetary Transport System, whatever you want to call it, it's essentially an upscaled version of the Dragon with an elongated section with all the people inside it. And so it serves as the launch escape system. It serves as the upper stage to make the trans-Earth injection, and of course it serves as making the propulsive landings onto Mars. But he's obviously I don't doubt that the propulsive system would function properly. Like, he's already made several propulsive landings onto the Earth with his Falcon 9 rockets. There's no question of that. People have seen the the Falcon 9 make the propulsive landing. People in Florida have seen it landing. People have posted videos of it landing. So we know that the propulsive landings back to the Earth is possible. So obviously we would incorporate that same technology into the Mars Colonial Transport System. As to whether he would be able to make a safe landing or not, well, we have maps of the entire Martian surface, so he would have an idea where would be a safe place to land. We have maps of the surface down to meter resolution, if I recall correctly. So he would know in advance where we would land it. But the real Achilles heel with his rocket is that he doesn't have the shielding. He thinks only one side of the capsule pointed to the sun will cut the mustard. It's not going to do that. It doesn't work that way. You have the solar flares being deflected in all directions by the sun's magnetic field, and then of course you have solar flare particles. You have to have all sides of the capsule sheltered. I brought this to his attention on Twitter, and he just obviously didn't take any notice.
Very good, nice answer. To go back on the water shielding, not knowing, is there a life expectancy on that shielding? I mean, is it possible that the water itself, if available and can be transported in meters thick, is there a life expectancy to where it can't absorb any more radiation?
I don't think there's a life expectancy on the water for being able to absorb. Of course, the water would probably get heavier as it absorbed the radiation over time. It would basically accumulate the particles that are coming through. The reason water is most commonly proposed as a shield is because, first of all, you're going to need the water anyways to drink and do washing up with and stuff, and you can use water to make propellants. You can use it for shielding, of course. And if the denser the shield, it gets less effective against certain types of radiation. For example, as the chief radiation you're concerned about is the protons. These the higher the energy of the proton, the further it will penetrate. Now, of course, the protons, they would be absorbed with the water and stuff. But as the particles actually enter the shielding and stuff, that actually causes secondary radiation in the form of neutrons, depending on how dense the material it is. As the proton interacts with the metal or the materials that that the shield is composed of, it actually will send secondary neutrons flying deeper into the spacecraft. Similarly, as a heavy particle, say an ion of some kind, like when people say high Z particles, Z meaning the atomic number, they refer to you see, astrophysics, we like to measure the metallicity of stars. That basically, we consider anything denser than helium a metal in terms of astrophysics. And so when we say high Z particles, high energy particles, we're considering ions of oxygen, ions of iron, ions of pretty much all these heavy particles that will be coming in. When they interact with aluminium, for example, they actually fragment into a dangerous spray of secondary particles. So water is commonly proposed because you'll need it to absorb both the primary and the secondary shielding. The secondary radiation. And so, but obviously you're going to need several meters of water to offer adequate protection. The ISS only needs about 20 centimeters worth of water shielding equivalent, because it's, as I said, it stays below the Van Allen radiation belt and doesn't have those kinds of problems as you would be the case on a mission to the moon or mission to Mars, because they would be beyond the protection of the Earth's magnetic field. Of course, there has been proposed for moon missions to launch, the time you'll launch, to actually travel down the magnetic field tail of the Earth. Because see, as the solar wind interacts with the Earth's magnetic field, it actually basically pushes the field backwards deeper into space, creating a tail, the so-called magneto's tail. And so it's proposed to basically launch your moon mission down the magnetic field tail to basically take advantage of the natural protection by the Earth's magnetic field. because the field would offer some protection from the solar flares, block out most of the cosmic rays. And so the idea is the moon actually enters this magnetic field tail. So the idea is you would launch down the tail, you would land on the moon, do the business that you got to do, get off the moon, and basically launch back down the tail while you still have all this protection. Basically take advantage of the time that the moon is inside this protection. Just for the record, the Apollo astronauts didn't do that. But a Mars flight obviously wouldn't have that luxury because it would only be in the Earth's magnetic field tail for a short amount of time. So you would need the water shield. But everyone seems to think that whatever works for the ISS will work for the Mars mission. There's been various other groups of private firms. There's the Mars One team. They think only 25 grams per square centimeter of shielding would be enough. That's about equivalent to 25 centimeters of water, and that's not gonna offer adequate protection. There's the guy Dennis Tito. He created the Inspiration Mars thing. He thinks he's proposing a capsule with an inflatable habitat, which would be lined with bags of water about 40 centimeters thick. That's not going to be enough either. You need to have several meters of water protecting you from this radiation.
All right, and just for the record, I'd like to make a correction. In Zorg's first question, I said 1 meter. He had 1 inch. It was my error there. That said, I'm going to go into another question. This one comes from Minion.